The vast majority of the Halloween franchise has been dedicated to the same central mythos. After killing his sister Judith on Halloween night in 1963, Michael Myers would go on to spend the next several decades terrorizing the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, murdering nearly everyone he comes across and somehow remaining unkillable in the process. There have been numerous attempts over the years to explain the source of Michael's evil, which has resulted in some of the most nonsensical plots in movie history. But what if there's something more to the Myers legend that even diehard fans might not know? What if there are parts of Michael's life that were never meant to be seen but could hold the key to finally understanding him? Well, let us find out, because in today's video we'll be looking at everything that can be known about Michael Myers' unseen backstory, if you haven't already guessed. Today's video will contain spoilers for various Halloween movies and other official media, as well as some speculation based on those stories and analysis of the series' overall themes. So if you want to avoid any potential spoilers, I recommend watching today's video after finishing the Halloween series, or if you'd prefer to discuss your thoughts on Michael's history with me, then I recommend watching this video before diving deeper into the series. And as always, please try to like, share, and subscribe if you're able to do so. It really helps support the channel and allows us to keep making videos like this one. So thank you, and let's begin! In recent years, it has become very popular among fans of the Halloween franchise to treat Michael Myers as if he is an Rorschach test. And no, I don't mean that in the sense that people read their own interpretations into his character, but instead in the sense that many now believe him to be what we call a blank slater, to use a more appropriate term, a vessel for evil. To better explain, when most people think of the Halloween series, they tend to focus heavily on the slasher elements, but that's only because the first film was released long before slashes became a common subject. If the series had come out in our current age, it would have been marketed almost exclusively as a slasher. And it's not hard to imagine why, given that most of the movies consist of Michael killing people, and to audiences unfamiliar with the genre's conventions, this might lead them to believe that Michael is purely evil, since evil is often associated with senseless violence. But within the context of slashers, this is far from the truth. In fact, I would argue that most slashers rely on the opposite assumption, that being that their villains are amoral rather than fully evil. While it's certainly true that some slashers are more sympathetic than others, none fit this description quite like Michael Myers. And this brings us back to the whole Rorschach test thing. When stripped of all the supernatural aspects of the Halloween series, what evidence do we have that Michael is actually evil, as opposed to simply misguided or deranged? If we're being honest, the answer is not much. Evil implies an intent behind one's actions, whereas the closest thing Michael has ever received in terms of explanation is that he was just born that way. Although the writers have offered some hints that there might be more to his story, like the infamous drawing of Michael shooting his father, the general consensus is that the series doesn't intend to delve deeper into his history. Regardless, though, there are still things to be said about the nature of evil. Namely, that it doesn't necessarily need a cause. Sometimes bad things happen to good people for no reason whatsoever, and that's something that horror tends to explore pretty often. But while that might be true, there's still one thing that cannot be denied. Something happened in Michael's past that turned him into the monster he is today. And until the series chooses to show us what that was, we can only speculate. So let's talk about Haddonfield. For anyone who is familiar with the series, it ain't surprising to hear that the town of Haddonfield, Illinois is widely believed to be a stand-in for real-life Haddonfield, Illinois, where director John Carpenter and writer Deborah Hill lived during the time they were developing the original Halloween film. Given that most of the story takes place around the town and its surrounding areas, including Smith's Grove Sanitarium and the Myers family home, it's safe to assume that these locations were loosely based on their actual, real-life counterparts. And it is here where we can start finding clues about what may have led to Michael's dark path. Unfortunately, these clues are rather subtle and depend heavily on what one chooses to read into them, but they're still worth exploring nonetheless. After all, the Myers family wasn't exactly tight. We know this because during the events of Halloween 4, it is revealed that Laurie Strode has been romantically linked to two separate men named Paul and Jimmy, both of whom are implied to have been close friends with Michael throughout his childhood. Not only does this suggest that Michael was fairly well-liked in school, but it also shows that his parents were either emotionally detached or uninterested in his relationships. This is further emphasized during Halloween age 20 when we learn that Michael was raised primarily by his aunt following the death of his mother. Of course, it is entirely possible that the Myers family were just a lot less involved in Michael's life than most other families. But I would argue that there's something a bit more sinister at play here. This is the point in the video where I could easily dive into conspiracy territory and claim that the rest of us knew more about Michael than we do. Or that they were actively trying to cover up some dark secret from the public. But instead, ILL, leave that up to you and simply ask if it is possible that Michael's upbringing played some kind of role in his actions. If we recall scenes from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, it's clear that the residents of Haddonfield were well aware of Michael's legacy, yet seemingly did little to prevent him from going on another killing spree. Some of them even seemed to encourage it. At the very least, they didn't seem to care. Is it possible that something about Michael's appearance or demeanor was enough to scare them off? Or perhaps they saw him as some kind of hero, taking inspiration from the fact that he had been framed for murders committed by someone else. Again, I'll let you decide, but it's certainly something to think about. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Michael's backstory can be found within the film that started it all. In the opening scene of the original Halloween film, we see Michael strangling his younger sister, Judith, with a clothesline cord. He then proceeds to stab her several times with a pair of scissors, before leaving her body under a bed. Upon hearing this, many people have assumed that Michael's evil was triggered by some traumatic event that occurred prior to this scene. But what if the scene itself was merely a byproduct of Michael's underlying issues as opposed to the catalyst? It's true that this theory conflicts with the famous line from Halloween 4, the movie that introduced the world to Michael's sister, stating that she died because he wanted to see what would happen if he killed her. But what if that line was simply a lie intended to protect the truth? When analyzing Michael's behavior in the original film, it becomes increasingly difficult to ignore how calm he is during his killing spree. Granted, he appears to be somewhat uneasy around children, as shown by his reaction to seeing a group of kids playing football, but otherwise seems unfazed by the violence he inflicts on others. He even takes a moment to admire his work at one point. Could it be that this level of detachment is indicative of some kind of mental disorder? Could it be that Michael suffered from undiagnosed autism, sociopathy, or some other condition we're not aware of? Could it be that the trauma inflicted upon him by his family or other figures was so great that he became detached from reality altogether? It's all speculation at this point, but these are questions that the series would do well to answer at some point. Because in the end, that's what Michael's story is truly about. All of the masks, bodies, and kill counts in the series serve as mere distractions from the reality that something terrible happened to Michael in his past and that he has been broken ever since. Whether he was born with this darkness inside him or something happened that caused it to appear remains unclear, but until we get some answers, we can only continue speculating. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like and share this video with anyone you feel would enjoy it. And as always, remember to subscribe if you haven't already.